political commentator, Sijibumi Adebi Bennett, is here with us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the federal government brought up this policy. Some states are at a point brought up this same policy, but we see that a lot of times it is not implemented. And why do you think we don't go the whole hog in ensuring that these issues are implemented?
I think the reason why we don't do that is because when you don't put your child in school, the consequences are felt or are being realized years after. Yeah. It is not an immediate scourge. It's not something that gives you immediate results. So, we in Nigeria, we like to react to issues. We don't prevent issues. Almost all the insecurity we have in Nigeria today can be traced to that. Because education is like light. It enlightens the mind. So, and education is traveling in your imagination. So many of us will have entered the airplane before we ever stepped into one.
Exactly, in our school books.
And there are a lot of things that education brings to you, and you can't settle for less. So if you don't give especially the girl child, because when we're talking about 13.2 million, there's also a statistics that says 8 million out of those 13.2 million are in just 10 states. 5 of those states are in the Northwest, 4 of those states are in the Northeast, and just 1 is in the North Central.
So do you subscribe to the federal government's approach to prosecuting parents that do not have their children in school? How will that policy play out?
I don't think the federal government has the wherewithal to implement it. It has to be something that is implemented at the grassroots level, local government and the state levels. Because it's within the purview. So, and anything that the federal government does not have direct control over suffers much in Nigeria. For example, tertiary institutions, tertiary education, the ASUP of Nigeria can always take the federal government to the cleaners, and they will get results. But the NUT, can they do the same? Okay. Are they doing the same at the state levels? So these are the problems. So the state governors have to take up this responsibility.
Of this,
yes, they have to champion it.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it at this time, but thank you very much. The conversations will continue on this discussion. Thank you very much.
The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says one in every 5 of the world's out-of-school children is in Nigeria.
In 2018, UNICEF's survey revealed that Nigeria had 13.2 million out-of-school children, making it the highest in the world. But the federal government last year said that the figure had dropped to 10.2 million, following various interventions of the government and development partners.
Well, Minister of Education Adamu Adamu has stated that parents who refuse to enroll children of school age in schools across the country are likely to be prosecuted for sabotaging the efforts of the government at reducing the number of out-of-school children. It says this will help tackle the menace of out-of-school children. Now we have joined us in the studio a social commentator, Sijibumi Adebi Bennett. Thank you so much for joining us at this time. Very serious or staggering figures there if you look at what UNICEF said and what the federal government is saying. 10.2 million is still not a good figure, even if it's a reduced number from what the UNICEF said. The policy that the minister is trying to come up with, that the federal government will prosecute parents that do not take their children to school, would you say is bringing the cart before the horse? Or on which side are you on? Is this the right step in the right direction?
I think it's one of the steps in the right direction, but it's really, like you said, it's still bringing the cart before the horse, because it's an indictment on Nigeria, because that means you have 65 million children, out-of-school children in the whole world, and out of that 65 million, that means 30 million is in Nigeria. That's an indictment. Then it's even disheartening as a Nigerian that we have 13 million people. That's 1/5 of the world. It's just one country we're talking about, and we're not the most populous country in the world. I don't think we're even from number 1 to 5, because you can count some countries that are more than us in population. So, but like I said, and like I said earlier, we have a situation whereby no matter what the federal government is doing, if it's not complemented by the states, then everything the government is saying in Abuja is just hogwash. I'm sorry to use that word, because when you look at the situation of the states, as at last year, the government had to take Universal Basic Education Fund and deduct the counterpart funding from the states, from the Paris refund. Even not, the states wouldn't have. So what the government did as at that time was to make sure that all the counterpart funding from the states up to 2018 were deducted from source. So that gave the states the ability to be able to access the full 140-something billion UBEC funds. That's why you can see a bit of, development
in various schools.
Because we need, like I said, provision, number one, is key. What I mean by provision, infrastructure. There's some schools that you can't take your child to.
So you're saying that it's the willpower of the government, not necessarily the policy that, that you're trying to roll out. You're saying the bulk of the work stands or stops at the desk of the federal government or the various state governments? The
various state governments. The federal government can always initiate, but the implementation is at the state level.
So how do we prosecute parents who do not send children to school when the state governments are not executing policies that have been brought by the federal government?
That's the problem we're talking about, because there are no shared vision. So if you have UBEC funds for a number of years, and as a state governor or a state government did not assess because of counterpart funding, bring 50%, the government will give you 50%. It's free. And you did not assess because that shows the level of interest in education. And we're not even talking about the 37% by the SDGs, recommended by the SDGs. So it's a lot of work. So the government should prioritize education. And how do you do that? You bring the state to the table. It's not every time we have crises like ASU crisis that you have to bring the state, like minimum wage. Then what are the unions doing? What's NLC doing? All these things we're talking about still, trickles down to the underdevelopment we're facing. So by the time the mind is not learned, there are so many things we should teach at the basic levels. The civic education, jumping, not crossing the roads. People don't have this education. So by the time we are able to bring the states together, there is shared vision, then the states can implement the laws, because the federal government cannot implement the laws for the states.
Shijibumi Adini, Bennett, social commentator, thank you so much for your thoughts on this.